many ways, Caroline Simmons seems like she's taking a common political journey in reverse. In 2008, she began work on Barack Obama's presidential transition team. After spending time with the federal government in the Department of Homeland Security, she returned to Connecticut to serve in the State House of Representatives, representing the 144th District. Today, she is the first female mayor of the city of Stamford, doing the all-important municipal work to help everyday citizens. She joins the Municipal Voice today to talk about her first 100 days in office and the difference of running a city versus serving in the legislature. We'd like to thank our premier sponsor at Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com, as well as our sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Mayor Simmons, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We've been looking at your bio a little bit, and you started out your political career with the Obama administration with his transition team, and then for a while you worked at the Department of Homeland Security, and then you came back to Connecticut. What inspired you to come back to Connecticut?
I love my time working at the Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration. It was just such an important time to be in Washington, working on counterterrorism initiatives and protecting our country from a range of threats, ranging from border security issues to cybersecurity to terror attacks. But in the final year I was there were a series of mass shootings that took place across the country, from Oak Creek to Aurora to Tucson to the horrific shooting that took place at Sandy Hook, right here in Connecticut. And I was just like all of us, traumatized by what was unfolding on the news, and just so saddened by that tragedy. And felt really frustrated at the time, the inaction in Congress and the gridlock in Washington at solving that issue of gun violence. And in fact, the issue of gun violence that year actually, fell under our office at Homeland Security, under counterterrorism, because so many of them were categorized as mass casualty attacks. And so it was really a crisis our nation was facing. And I was kind of sitting at my desk in Washington looking from afar at what the Connecticut legislature was doing on gun violence prevention. And Connecticut at the time passed some of the strongest gun safety laws in the country. And so I sort of felt this shift in policymaking happening from Washington to the states and to state and local governments, where you can have such an impact on people's lives and really make transformative policy changes to improve people's lives for the better. And so that's what led me to want to move back home, run for state representative. And gun violence prevention was sort of a centerpiece of that campaign. And that's what led me to the Connecticut state legislature.
Wow. And so you did come back, ran for legislature and won, and were quite young at the time. One of the youngest legislators I think we've had.
Yes, I definitely have a few more gray hairs now than when I first started, but yes, at the time. And that was really exciting too. There was definitely a group of young people, getting involved in public service. And I think it's important that we have young people at the table, because millennials now make up the largest voting bloc. And I think it's important that we get more young voices in our legislature. Of course, that was also kind of the weakness, as you're knocking on doors, when people see someone who's young, there's always that skepticism, but I think it's also important that we bring in young voices.
Definitely. So you came back and you were in the legislature for a while, and then you went from, federal and state, and ultimately running for mayor. What inspired you to run for mayor of Stamford?
Well, I love the city. I'm biased, but I think this is one of the best cities in Connecticut, best cities in the country. And there's just so much opportunity right now, but there's also challenges we're facing. And I think this pandemic really hit home for me, because I was getting calls every single day from constituents and residents who were facing everything from unemployment to sick or dying from COVID. And I really, see this opportunity for cities to lead and to have strong leaders of our cities is so important. And, the position of mayor is such an important one, because you can really directly impact people's lives, whether it's fixing someone's pothole or improving a school or fixing a sidewalk or bringing in a business and jobs to your city. There's just so many opportunities that you have as mayor that we have in local government to directly touch people's lives. And so that's what really attracted me to this position. And I think at this moment in time, as we come out of this pandemic, I want to make sure that we're coming out of it stronger than ever, and that we're really building a city that's more equitable and inclusive and vibrant, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive and provide for their families. And I think a big piece of that is making sure that those who were hit hardest by this pandemic aren't left behind. And so that's what we're focused on. And I think that's what really attracted me and excited me about local leadership.
Yeah. You mentioned, obviously the pandemic has affected us all, but you actually ran for office, did a campaign during a pandemic. What was that like, and how did that differ from, your previous campaigns?
It was a totally different experience for all of us in government who know far too well the importance of door knocking and that face-to-face contact.
Yeah, there's no kissing babies during the pandemic.
Exactly. It wasn't really there during the mayoral race. So we did a lot of phone calls to voters. We did a lot of virtual events and Zooms. There were periods during the campaign where the COVID numbers would subside a little bit and we could do some outdoor gatherings, socially distanced. But it was a totally different experience. But I think it really kind of reemphasized how important it is to have local government that is in touch with citizens, that's serving their daily needs. I mean, literally, it was a once-in-a-century pandemic that upended everyone's lives. And so I think the issues that we were talking about in the campaign were just, really heightened by the pandemic, and the actual limits of the campaigning due to the pandemic were really, front and center of people's minds, which was fascinating. And I think brought a sense of urgency to the election and the issues that we're facing in our city.
Very cool. So you are now the mayor of Stamford, and you are, in fact, the first woman mayor of Stamford, which sounds a little crazy in 2021 or whatever, but you are. So did you think about that when you decided to run? Did that, come to your mind that you would be the first?
When I first was considering running, there were a group of women who are just amazing women leaders in the city that were encouraging me to run, and just how important it is to have more women at the table, and in all different industries, whether it's government or finance or bioscience. We need more women at the table in all these industries. So that was definitely an exciting part of the campaign, just all the women that we connected with, and the young girls that, wanted to see a woman leader. But I think, I mostly just wanted to be mayor, to be able to do a good job and to serve people. So I think, for me, it wasn't about gender. That's definitely an exciting part of this role, but it's for me more just being able to do a good job and to encourage more people to get involved in public service, but really to make our government work better for the people of Stamford and to make a difference in people's lives.
Very cool. So you mentioned, it's great for little girls to be able to see someone, becoming mayor stuff. And I know at CCM, we're kind of big on this. We've been doing a series of events recently called Representation Matters, in conjunction with the campaign school at Yale, which basically holds that, everyone should have a seat at the table, regardless of gender, race, all that kind of stuff. And you've said that you want your staff to look like the people of Stamford. And you recently filled a diversity, equity, and inclusion position for the city. Why is it important to Stamford, and why is it important to you?
I think that, well, first of all, when we're in a representative democracy, our governments are supposed to look like the people that they serve. And so I think one of the greatest strengths of Stamford is our diversity and the international population we have. So we have people that speak over 70 different languages in our city that come from all over the world, which is such an incredible thing. And I want to make sure that our government is reflective of that diversity, and that the people who are in this building look like the people that they're serving. So that's really been a priority, both for our cabinet and mayor's office staff. We have a number of women, we have women of color, we have Hispanic individuals in our office, and just to make sure that we look like the people that we're serving is so important. Yeah. But then I also think it's a matter of effectiveness. We know that teams do better, no matter what industry they're in, when they have more diversity, when they have more women at the table. We know that they're more effective, they're more collaborative, they're more efficient. So it's just important in order for our ability to execute as a city. So we started with the mayor's office and the mayor's cabinet. We've hired our city's first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, who's an incredible woman, Carmen Hughes. who's going to be working to implement more diversity, equity, and inclusion across all of our city departments. And then we're also prioritizing more diverse appointments on our city boards. So if anyone who's listening to this is interested in serving the city of Stamford, we've got about 20 boards you can sit on, everything from Parks and Rec to Harbor Commission to zoning to all different issues. If you're interested, please reach out to us at mayor's office at stanfordct.gov.
Definitely. There's a lot of cool positions that need, dedicated people who are enthusiastic.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned you're filling some of these roles and stuff, and that's because you're pretty new at this. You haven't been mayor of Stanford that long, about 130 days at this point right now. And for a lot of elected officials, people like to talk about their first 100 days. So how has the beginning of your administration been? How's it been going?
Been an incredible ride so far. Definitely a bit of a whirlwind the first 100 days, because it's so exciting. You're putting your team together, you're learning, but you're also trying to execute and implement a number of policies that we talked to promised voters during the campaign. So we're really proud of the work we've already accomplished in our first 100 days. So everything from, we launched constituent service hubs across the city to bring government services out into the community and to hear from residents on the issues that they care about. We've convened almost daily, actually, infrastructure meetings to talk about our priority projects for the city for the federal infrastructure package, which is such a historic opportunity for the state of Connecticut and for cities and towns to be able to capture this federal infrastructure funding coming in. So we've already applied for, or in the process of applying for, a number of federal grants for everything from the West Main Street corridor in our city to the Community Challenge program we applied for, to Safe Streets and Roads grants, to bridge grants, so all of our infrastructure funding. And then we've also hired a new economic development director for the city, and we've convened our first mayor CEO business roundtable with the top 20 companies. And we're working on a small business resiliency grant initiative right now. So I'm really proud of, and for the first time since 2015, we expanded the property tax credit program for senior citizens who we know are struggling right now with the rising cost of living, with inflation and everything. So we've expanded that program to make our city more affordable. So these are just some of the priorities we've been working on, and really proud of our team and the work that's been accomplished already, but we have a lot more work to do.
Very cool. You mentioned, you have all these policies you're trying to, execute and stuff, which, because you are now an executive, how does it different from being a legislator? And is there stuff you learned while being a state legislator that you've brought to the office of mayor that, influences your style?
Definitely a different role being in the executive seat, because you have to make decisions more quickly, and every day there's a range of issues affecting your city, from COVID to a shooting to fire to pothole, that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and kind of give that instant response. Whereas as a legislator, sometimes things took a little bit longer, and
little longer
bills,
sometimes,
on average take 3 years to pass. So definitely a much quicker pace, but it's a really fun, rewarding job. And I think being a legislator helped me understand how important it is to work with our local boards and our legislative branch here in the city. So we have to work closely with our Board of Representatives, our Board of Finance, and kind of having sat in that legislative seat and worked with the executive branch in Hartford, I think that brings a valuable perspective just on the importance of communication and working collaboratively.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. What's it like being on the other side of the door, now being the mayor? How do you approach conversations with municipal leaders when you were a rep, and how do you approach those conversations now with a role reversed?
And now that the role's reversed, it's funny because now I'm the one calling my legislative delegation and the governor's office and the speaker's office up in Hartford, begging for money for the city. And I've turned into that nagging mayor that's trying to get more funding for the city. But it's important. I mean, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be the ambassador for our city and, championing all the programs we want and getting the funding to support these initiatives. So that's been really interesting. And then I think, just, sitting in this executive seat, working with our legislative branch, has given me a good perspective, just, coming from being a state representative and just understanding how important it is that, district representatives, they want to feel heard, that their voice matters. They want to get constituent issues solved. And so we try to do the best that we can to work with them. We've met with almost each of our Board of Representative members individually. We're going out to their districts and we're trying to do everything we can as a city to solve constituent concerns that they're hearing. And so we're proud of the progress we've made there, but again, still more work to do.
Cool. So using your perspective as a former legislator, now mayor, is there anything you're looking at in this session that is important to municipalities? There's some remote meeting bills, HB 5269 and SB 467 that are, pretty important to our members right now. Is there issues that you're watching?
Yeah, this is a really important session. I think from a budget perspective, we're working really hard to increase the amount of school construction grant funding that we get for our city, because we have over 400 million in school capital needs. So that's something we're pushing for. In terms of legislation, we're really focused on getting mental health support. So we're looking at SB1 and also the mental health funding in the budget for youth, which we're advocating for. We actually joined a couple weeks ago. We were up at the Capitol with Mayor Elliker from New Haven, with Mayor Florsheim from Middletown, and a number of other mayors and first selectmen and women to advocate for $1 billion over 5 years in youth mental health support. So that's something we're focused on. And then, of course, with this year's a reval year for our city. So this is, every 5 years, the state requires that we do a reval for properties. And with home prices up 20%, we actually advocated for Stamford to be able to have the option to delay the reval if necessary for a year. So that's something we're working closely on with the state. And then, of course, we're very supportive of the funding and bills related to domestic violence prevention and gun violence prevention. So those are key things that we're working on. And then we're working really closely on just, with our DOT commissioner and the governor's office and the state legislature on infrastructure funding, which is just such a historic time for our state to be able to capture this funding. I think we're expected to get over $6 billion coming to Connecticut. So we want to make sure we're ready as a city to capture that funding to rebuild our aging infrastructure.
So you mentioned the home property prices going up by 20%. Did Stamford see a kind of, I know a lot of Fairfield County had this, a large influx of people during the pandemic moving out of New York and into the area? And did some companies also do the same sort of thing?
That was one silver lining of this pandemic. We saw an influx of residents and businesses coming to our city and, recognizing just what a great place Stamford is to live. It's a great place to raise a family, to work in, to start a business in. And actually, according to the 2020 census numbers, Stamford gained 10,000 residents since the last census. So we're now the second largest city after Bridgeport. We have 135,000 residents. And a lot of them were over the past couple of years coming from New York City. So we're hoping to keep them here, to continue to make those investments, to make our city more vibrant and livable, but also to continue to proactively recruit businesses and people to our city. So we're working with our economic development director on that. So if any businesses listening are interested in coming to Stamford, we've got beautiful Class A office space and a 30% commercial vacancy rate right now. So we've got great office space. It's much cheaper than New York City. It's about $44 per square foot. So please reach out to us again at mayor's office at stanfordct.gov if you're interested in potentially moving your business here.
There's a pitch for Stamford. I like that. So talking about the property tax, it's certainly always an issue for us at CCM. In your opinion, what's wrong with the way Connecticut does property tax, and how would you try to fix it?
We're one of the most reliant states in the country on property taxes to fund local education. And a lot of other states, put in more funding overall to support education. So, for example, in Stamford, and I'm sure many other cities and towns have this, 90% of our budget comes from local property taxes, and about 55% of that overall goes to our Board of Ed. So that's a huge number. It's a huge reliance on property taxes overall to fund our budget, and large proportion of that goes to Board of Ed. So, one thing we're also advocating for is the state to put in more funding overall for education to cities and towns. But then also we're, working to diversify the revenue sources we get as a city so that we're not so reliant on property taxes. So we're looking to increase the amount of state and federal funding we get, increase the amount of philanthropic funding we get, working with private sector partners on public-private partnerships and things like that. And so I think to the extent that we can, revamp the way that state aid is distributed so that it's more efficient. I support, regional cooperation, whether it's working with the WestCog or working to better partner with surrounding cities and towns so that we can be more efficient with state aid and not put all that burden on local property taxpayers.
Another side of the property tax issue is renters who wouldn't necessarily benefit from a property tax credit or some of those issues. How do you approach the need for affordable housing in Stamford? And are there any measures that you are taking personally as mayor to increase it?
Yes, definitely. So one of our top priorities is to make our city more affordable, inclusive, and equitable. So starting with renters, we know that so many people in our city are rent constrained, and we're short about 5,000 affordable rental units. And there's also a shortage of affordable senior housing. So we actually just conducted the city's first affordable housing study that we've done in many years. And some of the recommendations coming out of that include, first of all, increasing the supply of affordable housing, and in particular, looking at transit-oriented development around train stations. So that's something we're looking at. We're also looking at, increasing the amount of, we have something called the below market rate program in Stamford, where developers have to set aside 10% of new buildings to affordable housing, or they have to pay into our affordable housing trust fund.
Okay.
So we're looking at expanding that program. We're also looking at, taking inventory of all of our city-owned land and how can we creatively bring in more affordable development on city-owned land. So that's all on the rental side. And then on the home ownership side, we want to make it easier for individuals that want to transition to home ownership. So we're working on expanding opportunities to support individuals that can't afford a down payment on their first home, working to make that more affordable. We're also working to bring in different types of developers to offer more home ownership or even condo ownership opportunities. And then, we're also going to be working with the state and the federal government on this, because a lot of this comes from affordable housing tax credits, and there's all different kinds of low interest loan programs we can work with the private sector on. So yes, this is definitely a priority. And I think, for everyone living in our city, whether you're a young person trying to afford your first apartment, coming out of college, it's an expensive place to live. So we're looking at investing in workforce housing, all the way up to senior citizens on a fixed income, struggling to afford to live here. So that's why we just expanded the senior citizen tax abatement program. And we'll continue to focus on these issues so that we can make our city a more affordable place for everyone.
Infrastructure is an issue that's been coming up a lot, especially with the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. So there's some money going into some of the stuff right now. You've mentioned before that more people go through the Stamford train station than go through Bradley Airport. There's a lot of talk about major infrastructure pieces, rail and other stuff. Roads and bridges also need work. How do you personally set the priorities for infrastructure work?
Really important question, because we have so many needs. For example, 60% of our roads and bridges are structurally deficient. So that is a huge priority, because that's not only quality of life, but a public safety issue with residents and commuters driving on our roads and across our bridges every day. We need to make sure those are safe. Yeah. So that's really top priority. Second top priority is the Stamford train station, and just, making sure that we're revitalizing the train station. That's really the gateway to Connecticut, and oftentimes the first thing people see when they're coming into Connecticut from New York. So the train station, our roads and bridges, but also making our city more resilient to the effects of climate change. So we're currently funding the city's first comprehensive storm drain study across the city. And if we look at recent incidents like Hurricane Ida, which caused significant flooding and damage for our residents, we need to make sure we're better prepared and more resilient for future adverse weather effects caused by climate change. So we're looking at a number of resiliency projects to make our city more sustainable. And then we're also looking at regional projects. It's really important to coordinate with our surrounding towns. So we're looking at everything from making improvements on Metro North to making our city more bike and walk friendly. So a potential walk bike path from Greenwich up Fairfield County. So those are our other initiatives that we're working on. But I think overall, we're thinking about the lens of making our infrastructure more safe, more reliable, more equitable, and more sustainable.
That sounds good, like good stuff. I'm liking all the positivity I'm hearing. But as a final question, what are your feelings about the future of Stamford? Are you feeling optimistic about the future and growth of Stamford?
Yes, I'm so optimistic about the future of our city. We really have the wind at our back right now, and it's such an incredible city to live in, made up of amazing people from all over the world. And I think there's so much opportunity right now, and the key is to really seize this moment and making sure that we're building a more equitable and inclusive, vibrant city for everyone. And, that includes making sure everyone has access to a good paying job, making sure everyone has access to quality infrastructure, making sure that people have the opportunity to pursue their dreams here, raise a family here in a safe city with great schools. So those are the issues that we're focused on. And I'm really optimistic about the future of our city. And, people of Stamford are amazing people. The way they weathered this pandemic was really inspiring. And I know we can get through anything that comes our way in the future.
Definitely. Well, Mayor Simmons, thank you so much for speaking with us today about Stamford. It sounds like you're going to have an exciting time as mayor of Stamford.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to CCM for all that you do to advocate for cities and towns across the state. We really appreciate your partnership.
We'd like to thank our guest, Mayor Caroline Simmons. I'd like to thank our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com and paloaltonetworks.com, as well as our sponsors Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.